In the last couple of videos, we focused on amino acids. Amino acids link together by chemical bonds to ultimately form proteins that have elaborate three-dimensional structures, where those three-dimensional structures confer an array of different functions on the proteins. In this video, we are going to focus on some of the roles that proteins play within the body, some of which may be ones that you recall, others of which may surprise you. One key role of proteins within the body is providing support and structure, and indeed, proteins are a major component of a variety of structural elements within the body. These include bones, where proteins of a variety of different structures are required for the construction of strong bones. Also, within skin, nails, hair, claws of animals, and a variety of other things that we associate with support and structure, we will find proteins being the major component. For example, collagen is a protein that is critically involved in creating skin firmness. And in fact, some people as they age get collagen injections in order to make their skin seem more plump and firm. And indeed, what happens as people age generally is that in young people, the elaborate collagen network that we see here is vibrant. And as they get older, that collagen tends to break down over time. And as a result, the skin loses some of its youthful firmness and luster. So collagen is a key example of a protein that confers structural support, specifically with regard to the skin. Keratin is another example of a protein. Keratin is important in a variety of different contexts. It is a fibrous protein, and as a fibrous protein, it is involved in structural support of things like hair, hence this cartoon illustration that you may recognize as a hair, you may recognize it as who knows what, but this is intended to represent a hair enriched with keratin. Also, keratin is abundant in nails as well, and also found within skin as another component in addition to collagen that helps to give skin its firmness and rigidity. Hence, these are just a few examples of the ways that proteins provide support and structure, and are just one of many reasons why proteins are essential molecules within the cell. Proteins are also essential for movement. We recognize that people trying to build muscle often consume high-protein diets in an effort to stimulate muscle development. And the reason this is the case is because proteins are a major component of muscle. A couple of examples of those that are key to this are actin and myosin. In fact, actin is the most abundant protein in most eukaryotic cells. And actin and myosin generally are found in association with one another and team up to enable muscle contraction, as well as a variety of movements of non-muscle cells. So actin and myosin are essential for muscle movement or muscle contraction, hence contraction leading to movement of the muscle and the bones and tissues associated with that muscle. And also, actin and myosin play roles in a variety of other movements that we might not typically recognize, including such things as cell division. So much like actin and myosin play roles in enabling muscle contraction to form these muscles that we see here, they similarly enable the cell to move and pinch to divide one cell into two, and hence they play a critical role in cell biology. As in an earlier unit, we talked about how steroid molecules that have several fused rings act as hormones or chemical messengers that are produced in one region of the body and then transported to a different region of the body to transmit or carry a signal from one part of the body to the other to trigger some sort of change within the body and coordinate behaviors amongst different parts of the body. In addition to steroids being able to act as hormones, there are also a variety of proteins that act as hormones. One example of this is TSH for short, or thyroid stimulating hormone. Thyroid stimulating hormone is produced within the pituitary gland here in the brain after it's produced in the pituitary gland, it travels to the thyroid, located here in the neck, where at the thyroid, what TSH does is it stimulates the thyroid gland to produce a couple of different small organic molecules called thyroxine, or T4 for short, as well as triiodothyronine, which is called T3, and T4 and T3 together stimulate the metabolism in a variety of different cell types and tissue types within the body. So, in other words, TSH is the start of a very long signaling pathway of chemical messengers where TSH carries a message from the pituitary gland down to the thyroid, and then the thyroid is stimulated to make T3 and T4, which then travel throughout the body to stimulate metabolism. And hence, if someone has a dysfunction of the thyroid, that can cause them to either have very fast metabolism if the thyroid is overactive, and as a result of very fast metabolism, having things like a high pulse rate and low body weight. On the other hand, if they have a deficiency in T3 and T4, they can end up dealing with such issues as being overweight and having a hard time controlling their body weight, having a low pulse rate, and a variety of other effects of that as well. Insulin is another prevalent example of a protein-based hormone molecule or chemical signal. It's produced within the pancreas, and what its role is to promote the absorption and metabolism of glucose from the blood into the liver, fat, and skeletal muscle cells. And hence, if someone has diabetes and their glucose levels are hence too high and they take insulin injections, that insulin promotes the glucose in their body into getting absorbed so their blood glucose levels are not extremely high. So we've now talked about some of the key roles of proteins in the body. We've left out thus far a huge role that proteins play in the body, and that is they act as catalysts for chemical reactions. Remember that a catalyst refers to a substance that increases the rate of chemical reactions, with enzymes being the proteins that act as catalysts. We, in fact, will spend an entire unit later on looking at the subset of proteins referred to as enzymes. Some examples of enzymes that act as catalysts are involved in the metabolism of food through digestion, where carbohydrates that are ingested dietarily are subjected to the action of several of these enzymes, such as amylase, sucrase, maltase, and lactase, that take specific carbohydrate molecules, generally polysaccharides, and break those down from the polysaccharide, which we abbreviate here with several units joined together, into their individual monosaccharide units so that those can then be utilized for the generation of energy. Likewise, with proteins as a key nutrient that we consume, proteins, as they pass through our digestive system, are subject to the action of a variety of enzymes such as pepsin, trypsin, and peptidase, that we will talk about some of those later on in the videos, looking at how those break down proteins that we consume dietarily into individual amino acids, and then ultimately those individual amino acids through other enzyme catalyzed reactions can be reassembled into the protein structures that we need in our bodies. Fats, likewise, are decomposed through metabolism by the action of enzymes such as lipases, where the lip there indicates lipid, ASE indicates that the structure is an enzyme, and what lipases do is catalyze the decomposition of triglycerides, fatty acids, and other molecules into their individual building block units that can then be used as a source of energy within cells. So overall, enzymes, as key catalysts to control the rates of chemical reactions within the cells, play a massive role in life. Now we turn to another key role of proteins, and that is the role they play in transportation. What we see in the upper left-hand corner of the screen here is a cell membrane. Remember that the cell membrane has a phospholipid bilayer where we have polar heads shown as circles that face the aqueous exterior of the cell, as well as the aqueous interior of the cell, and the nonpolar tails shown here that form the interior of that structure that allows the cell to separate the interior components from the exterior effectively, and therefore preventing things from inside the cell just randomly spilling out into the exterior environment. So, how do molecules get into and out of the cell? The way they get into and out of the cell is through what are referred to as transport proteins. Here, many of these are referred to as channels, and that term channel is appropriate because much like a channel allows boats to pass through water from one specific location to another, these channels, or transportation proteins, allow specific molecules to be transmitted into and out of the cell. Generally, these transport proteins have a specific function where they transport one or a small set of different types of molecules into and out of the cell. For example, there are specific transport proteins that enable the passage of sodium ions into and out of the cell, as well as chlorine ions into and out of the cell to maintain osmotic balance of the cell. Additionally, there's separate transport proteins that are involved in the transport of glucose and other organic molecules into and out of the cell. So in this way, these transport proteins, or these channels, play a key role in determining what is able to get into and out of the cell. You could think of them really as a gatekeeper for the cell, and they very, very much help to maintain homeostasis within the cell and allow the cell to function and meet its needs, making them essential to life. Hemoglobin is another example of a transport protein. The reason why I chose these two as examples is the transport proteins work at the level of an individual cell, allowing material to get into and out of a single cell. Hemoglobin focuses at the level of the entire organism. In humans and other mammals, hemoglobin is a key protein that transports oxygen. In this schematic, the structures that look like snakes in green and blue represent the protein portion of this molecule, and you can see that oxygen binds to the hemoglobin, as well as iron binding to the hemoglobin. And this entire complex of iron, oxygen, and another organic molecule called heme is found within red blood cells, and red blood cells are responsible then for circulating the hemoglobin that's carrying oxygen around the body, therefore enabling all tissues to obtain the required oxygen. Due to the fact that iron binds to hemoglobin and is essential to the function of hemoglobin, this is why people who are iron deficient or anemic will have dysfunctional hemoglobin and often low oxygen levels because of the fact that their hemoglobin isn't able to adequately transport oxygen around the cells due to the fact that the hemoglobin dysfunctions if there's not sufficient iron available to bind to that. So now that we have looked at this role of proteins in transport, let's summarize the 5 main functions of proteins that we have explored here in this video. The first was we looked at the roles of proteins in providing structural support. That included examples like collagen and keratin that are major components of bones, skin, nails, and a variety of other organs, really providing the major source of structural support for the body. Proteins are also essential in movement. For example, actin and myosin are prevalent proteins within the body. They allow muscle contraction. They are also essential for processes such as the division of cells. Hormones, or chemical messengers, are commonly proteins. These include insulin and a plethora of others that carry signals from one part of the body to the other to trigger some sort of change within the body. Proteins also act as catalysts. Those are proteins that speed up a variety of different specific chemical reactions within the body, hence enabling proteins to really be major controllers of what's happening within the body by catalyzing different chemical reactions. Finally, proteins act in transporting both small molecules that are organic as well as inorganic substances, large and small, throughout the entirety of the cell and throughout the body. So with that, we are ready now to take a closer look at some of the key structural aspects of proteins and also look at how these molecules are assembled from individual amino acids. We will follow that in the upcoming videos.